This week on Inside Olympia, Washington's Office of Independent Investigations is up and running in one region of the state, investigating police deadly force incidents. But it has 5 more regions to go. How long will it take to get statewide coverage? It also has a brand new headquarters and evidence facility, but the agency's funding has been cut. What impact will those reductions have? On the program, for the full hour, the OII's director, Roger Rogoff.
From the TVW studio, it's Inside Olympia with host Austin Jenkins.
Welcome to Inside Olympia. It's been 4 years since lawmakers created the Office of Independent Investigations to investigate police deadly force incidents. It's taken not just months, but years to build a new agency from the ground up. Last December, the OII began taking the lead on investigations in one region of the state, but still has 5 more to go. At the same time, the state's budget woes have hit the agency just as it's trying to get to full staffing. This week, we get an update on the Office of Independent Investigations, where it's making progress and where it's still facing challenges. Joining me now, and for the full hour, is the office's director, Roger Rogoff. Welcome back to Inside Olympia. This is getting to be awfully familiar, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Thank you for having me back.
Our once-a-year conversation.
It's great.
Glad to have you. Let's do a little bit of background on first you as the director of this agency. Roger Rogoff was appointed as the agency's first director in June of 2022. Previously, he served as a King County Superior Court judge. He was also a deputy prosecutor in King County's prosecutor's office, where he tried more than 100 felony cases. He also spent 7 years as an assistant U.S. attorney prosecuting federal crimes. Prior to joining the Office of Independent Investigation, he was senior corporate counsel at Microsoft. And here's some background on the agency he leads. The Office of Independent Investigations was created to conduct thorough, independent, unbiased investigations of cases where police use of deadly force is used. It is overseen by an 11-member advisory board made up of police, prosecutors, defense attorneys, a tribal representative, a mental health professional, and family members who have had loved ones killed by the police. It currently has 66 staff members, 31 of whom are investigators, on its way to full staffing of about 80 people. OII currently has 3 active investigations. It has completed 2. It is also reviewing 6 cases that occurred before the office was created. In the current state budget, the Office of Independent Investigations took a 20% budget cut. Let's start with just a reminder and a reset of the origin story of this agency. What was happening that led to its creation some 4 years ago?
Sure, and I think you can start with a number of cases nationwide where police used force against people between 2010 and 2016-17. That led to a task force that put an initiative to the people of I-940, which changed the standard for prosecuting police officers who use force against people in order to prosecute them, taking away the requirement that the prosecutor prove malice. They also required that there be an independent team that does those investigations. Independence in 2018, when that law passed, meant that a group of law enforcement officers other than the agency that actually used force would do the investigation. After 2018, you had George Floyd, you had Manny Ellis locally, a number of other cases that made national news, and there were folks in the community who felt that that just wasn't independent enough, that these investigations deserved real transparency, real work, real change in who conducts them, and they really wanted that independence. And so a task force put together a number of recommendations, and as a result, the legislature passed a bill in 2021 that requires the creation of a new agency that is not any existing police agency, and the investigations when police use deadly force should be done by that agency. It's a statewide agency. Its 2 sole jobs are to investigate new incidents of use of deadly force by police and to review prior incidents of police use of deadly force when new evidence exists or has come to light that was not considered in the original investigation.
And so we're moving from regional task forces investigating police deadly force incidents to one statewide agency that's doing this, but still on a regional basis. The big development that happened after we last spoke about a year ago was that as of, I believe, December 1st of 2024, and you had previewed this when we last spoke, the Office of Independent Investigations took over the lead on police deadly force incidents in Region 1, which is a huge swath of western Washington, includes parts of southwestern Washington, as well as the Olympic Peninsula. So let's start there.
Sure.
Almost a year on. How is that going?
So on December 1st, 2024, we opened our doors to new incidents of use of deadly force in southwest Washington, those 12 counties that you're talking about, up the peninsula and down to Clark County, including Thurston County. Since that time, we've had 5 call-outs. We are only taking fatalities, so only cases that result in death. And we've had 5 cases that we actually went out and investigated. And when that happens, no matter what time of day or night, we get a call. We blast out that information to our investigators and our staff. Our investigators respond. They are there at the scene of the incident. They begin the investigation from the ground up. They help collect the evidence. They work with the Washington State Patrol Crime Scene Investigations Unit, who is a civilian part of WSP who helps with that crime scene processing. We then do all follow-up interviews. We do all interviews at the scene. We collect body-worn camera. We collect any other video that exists. We canvass the neighborhood and any other investigatory work that needs to be done on the case. When we are done with the case, we write a report, which is very different than what happens now. So we take all of those individual reports from our investigators, we put those together, and we create a sort of summary report that in depth discusses what we found out happened and how we discovered that it happened. And to me, that report is incredibly important because it sheds that transparency on investigations that have not always been so transparent, especially for families and the community. What had happened before is that you would have an investigation. All of those police reports that are done during the course of the investigation are put into a file given to a prosecutor. That prosecutor looks at all that information, and it's usually the prosecutor who then is the first person who provides an overview of what happened that goes along with its decision. Yeah. So we provide that overview without, of course, the decision. That's the prosecutor's job. We've had 5 of those cases since December of 2024. 2 of them have been completed and final case reports have been written, one occurring in Vancouver and the second occurring in Centralia, and then 3 other ones are pending. 2 of them from May on the same night, one in Poulsbo and one in Ridgefield, and then a 5th one in Vancouver that happened a little bit later.
And these reports are public. They're posted to your website. They're available for the public to read. They also get handed off to the prosecutor in that county to decide whether to make a to decide whether to file charges.
Not only that, they before they are released publicly, the family is briefed on it, and the involved officers receive information about it.
So what has been the experience so far, because this was the first real test run of this agency? 5 incidents. The first one happened just within a couple of days of opening up on Region 1. And then, as you noted, on the night of May 7th, you had 2 different call-outs. How's it been going in terms of, are the law enforcement agencies remembering to call you guys? Have you been able to respond in a timely fashion? Do you have the sufficient staff to do this? Was the training sufficient to actually complete this work? Did you have the right policies in place? Lessons learned.
So overall, it's been positive. We have done good work. We've completed reports that are understandable and clear for the community and for the public. Anyone who reads those reports, I think you'll find that they are in depth, they're professional, the investigation was professionally done, and that's the most important thing to me. You can imagine that the first time you do something, There are always going to be things you can improve upon. We've worked on getting to scenes faster. We've worked on the order in which we address sort of the tasks at the scene. We've worked on making sure that we have certain equipment there first rather than later. Just things to speed up the process, which has been incredibly helpful. And we continue to show the law enforcement agencies who are in these particular locations that we know what we're doing, that we're doing an investigation that is similar to any homicide investigation that occurs, and it looks familiar to them, and I think that that's really helpful as well.
What is, can you give me an example of something that's gone well or really well, and maybe an example of something that has been a real learning lesson?
I think that the reports themselves, the final reports, are a game changer.
And I've read the two final ones, and it's true. They are plain English. It's not legal speak. They're chronological in nature for the most part. They're well organized, and yeah, you can. And as someone who's not trained as an attorney can read them.
And for someone who was an attorney, speaking normally is really hard. And so we've worked incredibly hard at making sure that that is done. And I would also say that the family liaison program has been really different.
This is
for
where
folks.
somebody from your staff is actually assigned to the family of the person who is deceased.
Right. And one of the things that we heard as we were being created was for families who just lost someone to a person in uniform, no matter the circumstances, it was really hard sometimes for some people to then be approached by someone who was their liaison wearing the same uniform or a similar uniform. Having people who are civilians, who are not connected to any law enforcement agency, and whose sole job it is to connect that family with the investigation so they know what's going on, they have an understanding of the process, and then being able to connect those families to any services they need in the community. I mean, this is as someone who's not doing that work directly, it's so different, I think, for families to have that connection rather than what had happened before. So those are two things that have gone really well. I think that for the first couple investigations, it was difficult to make sure that we got to work in as quick a time frame as we possibly could, and that was really the hardest part. We are in Region 1, and Region 1 is huge geographically, right? You go from Jefferson County down to, or Clallam County down to
Skamania, basically.
Right.
And to Clark County, and then east to
Skamania,
Skamania,
Waukegan, like all those counties down there. And we have people living throughout that region. We have investigators living throughout that region. But still, if the incident happens in Clark County and you live in Thurston County, that's a 2-hour drive, and you've got to get there in a reasonable amount of time. And for officers who are being processed, that's a difficult time period where something has happened, they don't know what's going on, and they're waiting to be processed, which means given the opportunity for an interview, having their uniform removed if we need that for evidence, having the rounds counted from the gun to make sure we know how many shots are fired. All those things have to happen in a particular way, and you don't want those officers waiting a long time. Similarly, you don't want the deceased without an investigative team there on the roadway for any length of time. You don't want anyone else who relies on us to be waiting, like the Washington State Patrol, crime scene investigations, and so forth. So tightening the time frame has been really important to us, and we've made some decisions that make that a little bit easier.
So what decisions? How are you solving for that problem?
So one of the things that we've learned in a little bit of outreach to the IITs who have done this work before is that what they typically do is 10 to 40 investigators descend on the scene.
10 to 40.
When they hear about it, right? And then when they get a critical mass of detectives there, they brief and hand out tasks for everyone to do, and then they start doing the work. So that is a process, right? That takes everyone to get there. That takes a briefing. And then handing out tasks, and they start doing it. We started out with that idea because we wanted to do the work. It's the way people knew how to do the work. as we started doing it, it became clear to us that it was more important to get some of that work done right away. And so we don't wait for everyone to get there. As soon as we have an incident commander on scene, we take over the scene. As soon as we have 2 investigators there, we send those 2 investigators out to do the officer processing. We don't wait around for a full briefing. Technology is such now that you can do that briefing in any way, anywhere, anytime. And so we've just made some decisions to be creative in that way, to get the work started faster, and I think it's been helpful. It's not perfect, and it will continue to improve, but those are some of the things that we think about.
How many investigators are you sending to these scenes?
Our intent is to send between 10 and 15 to each scene. When I say 10 to 40 for the IITs, oftentimes what would happen is they'd go and then they'd start kind of sloughing off or sending detectives home when they didn't really need them. We don't have that luxury.
Yeah. You're
but,
a small team.
Right, and they're a little bit smaller. But it is certainly bigger teams than I think originally conceived by the legislature, who were thinking 5 to 6 investigators per region. And that's not enough. Yeah. And the other thing to think about when you start thinking about budgets and resources, which I think we'll talk about soon, is if you want 10 investigators at a scene, you need a lot more than 10 investigators capable of responding to that scene, because people are on vacation, people are ill, people can't be on call 365 days a year. So,
have you figured out some ways to get people to the scene faster?
We have requested and received a permit from Washington State Patrol to use certain types of emergency lights to get there a little faster, get through traffic, make sure that we're seen and heard. Not blue and white lights like law enforcement, but more emergency lights that you see maybe on ambulances or you see on other types of emergency vehicles. So we've gotten that permit. We're working on getting the training done, so all of our folks are prepared to do that in that way. And hopefully we will be using those soon.
Have you been thinking about just where people are placed?
We think about that all the time, but there's a limit. I mean, if you think about, just for your viewers, we have 6 regions. Region 1, and they're not going to open in this order necessarily, but this is just the way they're numbered. Region 1 is the one we've already described. Region 2 is Pierce County alone. Region 3 is King County alone. Region 4 are the 3 North counties and Island County. So Skagit, Whatcom, and Snohomish and Island. Okay. Yep. So those 4 counties, and then you have this big region in the middle of the state, which is from Okanagan down to the south central counties, and then you have everything east, and that's Region 6. So those 2 regions are huge, and the reason they're so big is because the regions were created based on a rough, even number of incidents per year over the 10 years before we existed. So those big regions, no matter what you do, it's going to take a lot. It's going to take people a long time to get there. And so there are just some limits that exist and that we will do everything we can to overcome, but are going to slow us down a little bit.
I have some more questions about the response and how that's going, but let me stop for a moment, step back, bigger picture, ask you about the timeline for getting other regions up and running and online.
Sure. So we are going to announce before the end of the year the next region that's opening, but we're going to couple that with hopefully a roadmap dependent on resources, where we hope to open each of the next 4 regions after that, so all 6 of them statewide. We want to do that because we want folks in regions we're not immediately opening to know that we intend to, that we want to, and that we have been thinking about that since the moment that we became an agency. And I think about Spokane County, which has ever since the beginning has been very concerned about, at least members of that community have been very concerned about our presence in that county and in that region, which is Region 6. So we want people to know that we're working on that. We have hired investigators in, I think, every county, every region within the state. And we are not waiting to do those hirings. But once we opened in Region 1, we needed to make sure we had the numbers there. And so we sort of did some focused hiring.
So when do you anticipate announcing the next region and then the timeline for the others?
We will announce all of it before the end of this year.
Okay.
And with regard to the timing, we're still working on the details, and I want to be careful about talking about it.
Just in terms of the schedule of kind of activating each region, can you give us a sense of how far out, how many years out or months out you're anticipating at this point to get to all 6 regions being up and running?
I wouldn't want to say, and the only reason is that it's really important for us to do significant outreach with the law enforcement agencies in those regions we open and with community in the regions we open. And so some of that decision making is dependent on how long it takes for us to get from announcement to opening in the next region, and what our estimate ends up being there, and then being consistent with all the others. So it'd be a guess if I gave it to you right now.
And I presume I can't get you to tell me what the next region is.
Not today.
Okay. So you mentioned resources.
But you'll be my first call.
I appreciate that. You also mentioned some of this, or a lot of this is contingent on resources. You did take a budget cut at a time when you've been asking the legislature for more resources. In fact, I mentioned the 80 or so employees at full staffing. I think the last time we spoke, you said you were thinking more in the 100+ numbers for some of the reasons you had just raised about, when people are gone on vacation or sick, can't be on call 365 days a year. So how much of a setback was this budget cut? And where does that leave you heading into a supplemental budget year in terms of your budget ask?
I think every agency in the state had a setback last year. It was a really tough budget cycle.
But not every agency was sort of starting from scratch and still in the building phase.
And it's one of the messages that we impressed upon legislators is that when you hit a new agency, it has a different effect than when you hit a real established big agency that has been adding and working on programs for a long time. And they understood that. We were looking at a much bigger cut than we ended up getting. So I'm very appreciative of legislators and the governor for supporting us through that and making sure we didn't have to cut people. We didn't have to lay anyone off. We didn't have to
So at one point
anyone.
the cut was significant enough that was being proposed. You were looking at actually having to reduce staff.
There was that possibility. Wow. So we appreciate that, and I am confident that legislators who are following this agency and who know what we're doing and how we've been doing it understand at this point that you cannot do this work without the numbers that we're talking about. And I am confident that when they have the money, we're gonna get the people. But it's hard to pull that from nothing, and I understand that. And we will continue to work on legislators to help us work through that.
So what has been or what will be the effect of this 20% cut?
It slows us down. We were hiring consistently throughout 2024 and into 2025. We hired a lot of people, I think like 20 or so investigators in that year-plus period, which is fast and pretty impressive hiring. We have not hired in the last couple of months. We have a couple positions that we're going to hire here in the next few months that were left over. And after that, we have to wait for those resources. So it's going to slow us down moving forward. It hasn't slowed us down to this point, but it's slowing us down moving forward.
And then what will you be asking for in the supplemental budget in January?
We have asked for 5 additional investigators for this budget cycle. And after that, there'll be more requests.
What about equipment, supplies, technology?
So we are comfortable with the equipment and the technology we have. One of the nice things that the governor and the legislature did for us last year is they really relieved us of provisos, which restrict how we spend our money. So we were able to use the money where we needed to, which I think is really important for a new agency that is getting started and is sort of filling in gaps. And so we use that money where we needed. Certainly we'll need more, but I don't think that is really the biggest issue for us. It is overwhelmingly having the people, the investigators we need in order to do the work.
Just before we go to break here, what is your message to lawmakers going into the supplemental year, given that you're not fully operational yet? There are 5 other regions still waiting for this agency to step in and take over. There are community members that you've alluded to who are waiting and wanting this to happen. There are police accountability groups who have expressed frustration already at the pace. And I know you've always said you'd rather be sure and be ready rather than take on a region and find that you weren't adequately staffed. But what's your message going to be to lawmakers about kind of where this goes if they don't adequately and fully fund you?
As a longtime prosecutor and a longtime judge, I have seen really good ideas come out of the legislature, and I've seen some not so great ideas come out of the legislature. This is a really good idea. This is an idea that makes common sense, that you don't want the people who are being investigated to have this appearance of connection to the people who are investigating, that you want to have the community trust these investigations. You want them to be independent. It's really a divine idea. In order to make it work, we're going to need the resources to do it. So my message to the legislature is, you did something really incredible here. Let's make it work. Let's finish the job. We've proven we can do it and do it well. Let's get us the resources we need so we can do it everywhere.
Okay. Just before we go to break here, I know that you just opened a new evidence facility. You have a new headquarters. You've got 11,000 square feet of evidence storage space and 9,000 square feet of office space. That's here in Thurston County. How significant is that? What does that signify?
We have been looking to have a permanent place to call home since we started, and that headquarters needs to include a state-of-the-art evidence facility so that we can keep the evidence that we collect in a place that's secure and abides by the type of accreditation standards that every police department has, so that if and when we are ever in a courtroom talking about our investigations, that evidence and that information is accepted and given the right amount of the proper consideration by the court. So it's been really important to us, and we made it to that point. It is a physical manifestation of this idea that the legislature has. It means that we are moving forward and that we are making progress.
Okay. We will take a quick break. When we return, we continue our conversation with Office of Independent Investigations Director Roger Rogoff. Back right after this.
I grabbed his foot to shake it to wake him up, and it was cold. The paramedics came in, and I'll never forget his look. It was like he felt so bad for me. This could happen to anybody. It has nothing to do with your parenting. It's just really getting that message to your kids so that when they go out into this world, they have a chance of coming back home.
Welcome back to Inside Olympia. Joining me once again is Roger Rogoff, the director of the Office of Independent Investigations, which is tasked with investigating incidents of police deadly force in Washington state. I want to get back around to these initial investigations that have been that are ongoing and 2 that have been completed. The statute says the investigations and the final report need to be issued within 120 days. Doesn't look like you've met those. It seems like it's more like been 180 days. What are you learning about that? Do you think the statute needs to change? Do you think as you guys get more familiar with this, you can accomplish it within 120 days?
I think between the need to get all of the information from the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab to do forensics and our need to write the type of report that we're writing, that the 120 days is aggressive. I could see a time where maybe we get there, but I think that the 6 months, 180 days is probably a lot more reasonable. It's not a deadline. It is a a request from the legislature and a requirement that we notify our advisory board if we're going to pass that 120-day mark, which we always have, and we notify our advisory board at every meeting. So if we get to day 121 and we have an advisory board meeting, we'll tell them, and then we will also tell them if the next advisory board meeting, hey, we're still not quite done, and then they get the report before anyone else does as well, so they see it. But yes, I think 120 days is an aggressive timeline.
So is a change to the statute needed or being contemplated?
We have talked about asking. I don't think this year is the year for us to do that. We have a couple other fixes to the statute, which are a lot less interesting, that we wanted to do. But at some point, we're going to consider that.
I just briefly do want to ask you about the night of May 7th when you had two call-outs, one in Kitsap County and one in Clark County?
One in Poolsbo, one in Ridgefield. So yes, in answer to your question.
So how did that go?
First of all,
Sounds pretty intense.
Incredibly proud of my staff and our leadership team who didn't panic. We were at the Poolsbo incident.
That's where everybody had gone.
That's where everyone had gone. Now, we hadn't sent everyone. We had investigators in Region 5, which is across the mountains, but in central Washington, who had not responded to that scene. And when we got the call in the middle of that investigation for the scene in Ridgefield, we considered whether we should just let an IIT cover it because we didn't have the people. But we assessed, we talked to our folks in Region 5, determined how long it would take them to get over the mountain. We looked at the specific facts in that Ridgefield case, which was a pretty contained incident in a government-owned building. And so we had a little bit more time than we might normally have, and we made the decision that, yes, we can do this. Our folks from Region 5 drove over. Some of the folks who were at the Poolsbo incident drove down to the Ridgefield incident. We had enough people to cover it. We had 10 people who ended up responding, and we did it. And I'm incredibly proud of not that they did it. They're professional people. They'll do it if they need to. But it was just a thoughtful process that we went through in order to figure it out, and it went very well.
And it does seem like a real test at that point of the kind of capacity of this new agency.
It was. If there had been a third one, we would not have been able to do it.
Is that an argument? And remind me of what's going to happen to the regional teams. Are they going to still be in existence after you guys fully take over?
I don't know. That's a decision that they have to make. I think there will always be work for shared agency investigations in a region, right? I mean, if you have cases that cross over different jurisdictions, it'll be helpful to have the capacity to do that. And there are going to be times where we are not going to be able to do a case for maybe we have a conflict, maybe there's something else that happens. Yeah. And so I think there's still a place for them.
So is that an argument or a conversation to be had about maybe keeping those in place and not just dissolving them?
Either keeping them in place or having some other mechanism to do similar work.
Some other sort of backup.
Right.
You just prompted a question I had on my list here, which is this idea of disqualifying. I noticed that you have a process here when these investigations begin of people who respond having to go through a conflict of interest checklist, and you actually disqualified a couple of investigators in the Centralia case. I'm just kind of curious about that process.
Sure. Well, first of all, IITs do the same thing. They're required to by their La Texas statute, so it's not new. But we, within, I'm going to get the hours wrong, either 48 or 72 hours, our folks have to complete a conflict of interest assessment, which is written and made part of the file. If those conflicts exist, the supervisor makes a decision about whether that conflict is disqualifying. So in Centralia, we had a couple people who knew people involved in that incident, and so they were just simply disqualified. I think conflicts happen all the time. As a judge, judges conflict out of cases constantly. It's just something that happens. It's not good. It's not bad. It's just something that occurs. And I like the fact that our folks are very careful about it and will let us know when they feel uncomfortable being part of an investigation.
What is the status? Do you have a sense of when the three outstanding investigations might be completed?
I think mid-November for the 2 that happened in May, and a couple weeks after that for the last one existing.
So potentially by the end of the calendar year.
My hopes, yes.
Okay. The other thing that your agency is doing is these look-backs when you decide that it's warranted. Again, this gets to that conflict question, kind of an interesting situation where one of the board members' sons was killed several years ago, a decade ago, I believe, by Lakewood police, and or by a sniper, I think, from Lakewood. It happened in Fife. This is Leonard Thomas. That family wanted this case reviewed, but because his father is on the board, explain to us how you handled that. The ultimate answer was, yeah, it does deserve a second look, but how did you handle that because of the potential conflict of having a board member requesting?
Sure. It's really important for us to maintain an appearance of fairness, and that appearance of fairness is for both communities that are involved as well as law enforcement. And we all have to trust the investigations that happen. Fred Thomas is Leonard's father. He is not only a board member, he is the co-chair of our advisory board. He was deeply involved in hiring me. He was deeply involved in hiring most of our leadership. He was part of the advisory board that voted on every one of our investigators who has law enforcement experience that currently works for us. People in our agency have built personal relationship with him, as you do when you work with someone like that. And he's a really important part of our agency. So when we received his case, we made the very difficult decision that it's not appropriate for us to make the discretionary decision about whether to reopen his investigation, that should be done by a third party. So then the hard, you can always recognize the problem, but coming up with a solution is never easy. What we ended up doing is some of our investigators did the Garrity review of that material and put it together and organized it, sent a memo to a neutral third party who we hired on a contract basis to review the case and make the decision that I would have made, that discretionary decision about whether to reopen the investigation. It ended up being with Judge Bill Downing, a former King County Superior Court judge who now works for an organization that provides neutral decision-making, like arbitrations and mediations, called JAMS, and he did the work. He wrote a report. That report came to us. We then wrote a memo to Mary Robnett saying, hey, there's a recommendation that this be reopened. We're giving it to you, and we want you to decide whether any additional investigation actually needs to be done.
She's the Pierce County prosecutor.
She is, I'm sorry. Yeah, right. Mary Robnett's the Pierce County prosecutor. What investigation actually needs to be done? And then, of course, you make the decision about whether that case should be prosecuted.
So just to be clear, under normal circumstances, if there wasn't this potential conflict of interest, you would make the decision and then your investigators would reopen and take a second look.
And our investigators would do a full review of all the material, collect it for me, make a recommendation as to whether I should reopen it, and then I would make the final decision. Here, we did not make a recommendation. All we did was collect the material and provide it to Judge Downing.
And then when he made the decision that, yes, there should be a second look, am I understanding correctly that then you handed it off to Mary Robnett as the Pierce County prosecutor?
Right. We handed it to the prosecutor who can help direct investigations, and we basically said, here's the question. Do you need more investigation? What investigation do you need? Depending on that answer, we're willing to do things that don't create a problem with the conflict. If it's simple collection of materials, if it is sending some stuff to a lab, we're willing to do that. If it involves us making discretionary decisions about how the investigation should go, then we need to talk about a different option for that, which may be hiring some investigators.
And she hasn't gotten back to you yet, is that
right?
No,
I mean, she needs time to review it. She needs time to assign it to someone, and we're in touch with her, and when she's ready, she'll give us that answer.
So that's obviously a unique case and situation. What about the other legacy cases that are under review? I don't think the statute is specific about how long you take, as it is with the current cases. So what are you telling families? What's a reasonable expectation about how long it's going to take to review these and get some answer?
So we opened that program in November of 2023.
Right, you did that before you started doing the investigations in the new incidents.
That's right, with the idea that some of our investigators could get some experience and some understanding of how these cases look and what investigations have happened in the past, but also so that we could start doing some work and moving forward with the agency. We've had 29 cases submitted to us. A number of those were declined based on the written materials because they did not allege that there was new evidence, or they were not a fatality, or they did not involve a Washington Commission law enforcement officer. So those just are outside of our jurisdiction. We can't look at them. There are, I believe, 9 that are currently undergoing review to determine whether or not the written allegation of new evidence actually exists. And what that review looks like is collecting materials from the original investigating agency, the involved agency, and the prosecutor's office, and any other source that may have information that we're aware of, and really figuring out whether the prosecutor had that information, whether they considered it in making their decision. That has turned out to be incredibly complex because of the records we have to collect from so many different sources, but also because we have to make sure that there are no compelled statements from officers either included in those materials or that they are the source of information in those materials, because a criminal investigation cannot use those compelled statements, whereas an administrative investigation or a civil lawsuit can. So we've had to separate that information. It's taken an incredible amount of time and energy and work by our investigators. So it has taken time to get through those. We've also completed 2. We've had the Thomas case has been, we've had an answer, and the case has gone back to the prosecutor. We've had another, the Jason Hale case, which we sent back to the prosecutor with an indication that there was nothing new, there was no investigation for us to do. But we always send them back to the prosecutor so that they have that information and they can do with it what they will. There are a couple cases that are very close to having decisions made and will probably happen in the next few weeks.
I take it there's not a statute of limitations that's involved here?
There's not, with homicide being the precipient crime.
Just some other questions about how this is all operating and working. One thing I just think I do want to make clear about in the context of the budget cuts and what it's going to take to get to full staffing. My understanding is, remind me of how many investigators you have now?
31.
Okay, so that's about half of the overall staff. Am I correct that you think to be fully staffed you need 60 to 80 investigators?
I think we need over 100 investigators.
Okay. So let's just kind of lay that on the table. What's it going to take to get there?
It's going to take a commitment from the legislature to get us that many investigators. It's also going to take a commitment from us to be creative to see if we can bring that number down a little bit, which we are always willing to do. Mm-hmm. I mean, just as an example, one of the things that we've done early on is we learned that these regions should not have a fence around them, that using investigators from Region 5 to respond to incidents in Region 1 works, and we should do that. Same thing, we have people in Pierce County, that's Region 2, but they can certainly respond to Thurston County within a reasonable amount of time. Yep. So we've been much more fluid with the regions and the people involved, which will cut down on the number of investigators that we might need.
Okay. Do you have a dollar amount what this is going to cost?
Not sitting here today.
Okay. What's the status, just tick through some things, what's the status of sort of writing and making the policies for this agency? Is that work done, or is that never ending?
The policy, there are policies that are posted on our website, which everyone can see. They are the policies that relate to how we interact with the currently existing independent investigative teams, and those that relate to how we interact with the involved agency. We also have an internal investigative manual, which is in draft form, but is incredibly close to being complete. So we are getting to the end of policies. However, our policies, especially and you also have the general state policies, which we've included as well. And those have a yearly kind of review process. And we've changed policies since we started. We learned things about how we respond to incidents that we figured out didn't work, and we should do them differently, like doing a briefing before we start some of the work at scenes so that we can be faster, more agile when we get to incident scenes.
One of the questions that's come up is whether the family liaisons will respond to the scene or not. Have you made a decision about that?
They will respond if needed. So that will be very dependent on the family and what they need. It is not a foregone conclusion that family liaisons will respond to every scene. They have responded to some of the scenes in the past. Sometimes that's been helpful, sometimes it hasn't. And so we have made it a lot more flexible in terms of how they respond and when they respond to the scene.
Are you fully staffed with tribal liaisons? I think you said you had 2 as of last year.
And that's where we are right now. So no, not completely, but we're okay for right now.
And every time an incident happens, there is a process of determining whether the person who is killed by the law enforcement is a enrolled tribal member, and then if so, that would, I guess, trigger involvement of the tribal liaison.
If anyone involved
If anyone
is a tribal
involved,
member,
okay.
or if tribal lands are involved, we will get our tribal liaison looped in and to become part of the conversation.
You need advisory board approval to hire anyone within 2 years of having left a law enforcement job. Have you triggered that yet?
Yes.
And so what's that been like? What was the circumstance, and how did the board view that?
We have a number of senior investigators who are prior law enforcement and have been prior law enforcement within 24 months of their hiring with us. We've had a number of them who have no problem, passed through the board, no questions, not no questions, but no real issues. And then we've had people who don't get through the board. It has not been a rubber stamp. They have been concerned and want people who understand the mission of OII and are committed to it, and they believe we'll do the work in a reasonable way. And we've gone through that process.
Given the need for this office to have independence, but also given the need that these kinds of investigations require some law enforcement type training, how are you, as the director of this agency, navigating kind of keeping that independence while also, I guess in the ways you have to, leaning into things that are very law enforcement-y?
That's the magic of the agency. I mean, that is the question with everything we do. How do you do investigations really well if you don't have people who have done it before? And the answer is, well, you need some people who have done it before. So how do you then, and the question you're asking, how do you then make sure that the mission stays front of mind? And it's a really careful hiring process is one of the things that we do, a hiring process that involves our advisory board at the front end in addition to the back end. They are part of our interview process. They are invited to participate in that. A set of questions that are different than I think any agency I've ever worked for, a more in-depth review process, and then just understanding as an agency that it's so important to walk that line, that you need to hire the right people, and that is right at the forefront of everything that we do.
There is a project to develop a proposal to recruit people with no prior law enforcement experience to train them to become skilled investigators. You have a plan to present to lawmakers and the governor a report on this by the end of the year. You've been seeking public input. Preview that for me.
It's been a pretty amazing process. We have a number of our leadership team working on it who have been seeking outreach, seeking input from community members, from law enforcement, from folks who are impacted family members, from people who are just members of the public and not part of any organization or have any particular point of view. And the questions are fascinating because you say to some people, do you think law enforcement should be involved in doing these investigations, or former law enforcement? No, absolutely not. Okay, then how do we do this? And the answers become really interesting and really insightful in terms of how we can do some of this work.
So what's the short answer to that?
There's no short answer, but we will. it's hiring and it's training and it's doing it carefully and it's focusing on the right people, the right mindset, the right mission orientation rather than the labels.
And to be clear, you have hired people into investigator training roles that are not prior law enforcement.
We have.
Yeah. So this is not like it's unprecedented.
No, we made the decision early on before this plan was necessary to do that work. So we're kind of ahead of the game.
I just found this in my notes. So I'm going to mention it. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Going back to the budget issue, you were asking for $50 million or $53 million more in the last budget or the current budget, 40% increase. You wanted to hire 30 more investigators. Instead, you got a 20% cut. So that's kind of where things landed.
We lived that budget cycle with everyone else.
There has been ongoing talk about, and in fact, bills in the legislature to set up an independent office of prosecution to look at these cases and decide rather than have the county prosecutors make the decision. Proponents think that that would be better because those prosecutors are pretty close to the law enforcement agencies in their communities. The bill's passed, I think, the House twice now and died in the Senate. What's your latest thinking or view of this? Some feel like your office doesn't work without that.
I think there's an argument to be made that that's accurate. We have supported the OIP bill the last two sessions. I've testified on behalf of it. The genesis of my testimony is essentially it's nice to have one place to send these cases that is unconnected and has no real relationship with law enforcement. I understand the argument being made by prosecutors about what their job should be, having been one. And if my understanding is that this bill is similar to the ones that have been proposed in the past, and if the governor is in support of it, we'll certainly support it as well.
What are you noticing about the potential or about actual conflict or friction between your teams and law enforcement agencies? I don't know if there have been cases where the regional teams have responded at the same time or gotten there first, but has there been friction, conflict? How's that going?
I think we've done pretty well. There's nothing noteworthy in regards to friction with law enforcement when we're trying to do our work.
This isn't like in the movies where the FBI shows up and the local law enforcement's there and suddenly they're not cooperating and they come to fisticuffs.
That has not happened, and I don't expect it to happen. I mean, we go to WASPIC every year and we talk to them about what we're doing.
And that's the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs. They're the hub for the spoke and wheel that is all of law enforcement across the state.
All 293 agencies in the state. And we talk to them, we open ourselves up to questions, we answer the really tough questions, and we're always willing to sit down with anyone who wants to talk to us. And frankly, we do the same thing with community groups as well. And not all community groups are thrilled with us all the time. We are hiring former law enforcement, which doesn't make everyone happy. We'll have those conversations whenever anyone wants to. I think that openness and transparency has led to some modicum of trust within both of those communities.
You do often say transparency is the product. I know that you are working on a updated strategic plan. Can we expect more data being on your sort of website and a full dashboard at some point?
So one of the things we've not wanted to do is provide data that's not good data or complete data. And because of the limited number of cases we're actually doing, on the ones we aren't doing, we get very limited information from law enforcement about those cases. So we've been loath to start publishing data and start trying to allow people to start trying to draw conclusions from it because it's not complete and it's not the type of data you'd want to make decisions based on. But it is one of the things that we intend to do. It's part of our statute. And as we open up and as we gather more data and more information, we will begin publishing those metrics and that information for the public.
Okay, we have just a few seconds left. I'll ask you the question I think I always end on. What do you want to be able to report in a year's time when we sit down again?
I'd love to report that there have been no new incidents and that we don't have anything to do. But absent that, I would like to be able to show some progress in expanding statewide. I would like to continue the incredible hiring we've done so far and be able to tout the people that we've hired like I can do now who are incredible, and just continue to make progress. I mean, I think the goal right now is to be statewide.
Okay. Roger Rogoff, the director of the Office of Independent Investigations. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Austin.
Thanks for coming in. Thank you for watching Inside Olympia. We will see you again next week.